I'm Bill Weir in Greenland, and this is CNN.
Very close to the front lines in southern Ukraine, where we're being shown these US-provided long-range artillery systems.
Tonight, a look at the new US weapons being sent to Ukraine, plus
spaghetti with tomato. But the price of this Italian staple has increased tremendously over the last year.
how Russia's invasion of Ukraine is increasing the price of food around the world. And
from the beginning, the investigation has focused on the unprecedented efforts by Trump and his allies to try to stop the transfer of power to President Joe Biden.
It's the January the 6th hearings kick off with a primetime showing. I'm Becky Anderson. Hello and welcome to Connect the World out of London today, where it is 3 p.m. More on those top stories in just a moment. First, a developing story with huge international significance. Iran is turning off more than 24 cameras that give international monitors access to its nuclear program. The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency says this could deal a, quote, fatal blow to the Iran nuclear agreement. Well, Tehran released this video showing monitoring cameras being turned off at nuclear sites. IAEA chief Rafael Grossi says Iran is planning to remove 27 of these cameras. And Iran says it's already started expanding its underground uranium enrichment. Rafael Grossi joining me now live from Vienna. It's good to have you on what is a worrying day. Does today's announcement by Iran effectively put an end to the additional monitoring measures that Iran agreed as part of the 2015 nuclear agreement deal?
Hello, good to talk to you again. No in and by itself, but very close to that.
Well, earlier today you said that if the JCPOA is not revived in the next 3 or 4 weeks, you'll no longer be able to give the world accurate details on Iran's advancements. So just explain where you believe we are at. You've suggested 3 or 4 weeks is all that is left before that agreement is dealt a fatal blow. What's going on? What is Iran planning at this point?
The reason for this is very simple. We have a number of means to verify Iran's activities in a number of areas related to the JCPOA. Cameras, as you were mentioning. We have other online systems that give us flows, give us monitoring of amounts that are being, of uranium, for example, that are being enriched, etc., etc., etc. So when Iran starts curtailing these accesses, at some point, if the JCPOA was to be revived, for that to happen, the participants need to have a baseline, the necessary amounts to know what is it that Iran has or hasn't in order for us to verify. When you don't have that, it's technically impossible to have an agreement. Or you can have one on the basis of no information, which I suppose is not going to happen. This is why we're saying this is a very serious thing. It has consequences. Of course it does.
This is, you say, a serious escalation. Let's be quite clear, if your agency cannot ensure continuity of knowledge about Iran's nuclear program, you can't implement the JCPOA's monitoring and verification process, can you? So that is the end of that.
We would not be able to do it on the basis of sound information, and I don't think you can have a good agreement on shaky basis. So that is not viable. But we hope there can be a possibility to do it. I've said today to the board of governors of the IAEA, which is in session right now. In fact, I stepped out to talk to you. We are discussing this, and I've said we have to sit down with Iran. We have to do it immediately. We have to redress this situation. They know that the Director General of the IAEA is ready to do that. It's up to them.
The spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry has said all of this is because of short-sightedness from the United States and from the EU3. Tweeting here, US E3 put their short-sighted agenda ahead of IAEA's credibility by pushing a miscalculated and ill-advised resolution against a country with the world's most transparent, peaceful nuclear program. The initiators are responsible for the consequences. Can you be clear here? Is this a country, Iran, with the world's most transparent, peaceful nuclear program, as you understand it?
Iran is perhaps the most inspected country. This is correct. This is correct. But this is commensurate to the activities that they have. It is also a function of the past JCPOA, and it's also, to a certain extent, a result of a past record and history. We don't have the time now to go into this, but it's a shaky history where with ups and downs and moments where they were not found in compliance with their commitment. That is the past. We want to look into the future. We have a problem now. The problem that we have now is that we need to have certain information, and they are not giving it to us. I'm not having a view on what Iran or others are saying about resolutions or no resolutions. There is a concrete problem here. The problem is that Iran has not been answering a number of questions from the agency. The problem is that Iran is now, instead of increasing cooperation with us, it's curtailing it. So what we are saying basically that this is going against the right direction. But like I said, of course, although this is a very serious step in the wrong direction, there's still time for diplomacy. There's still time for us to sit down and try to redress this. But it is a very serious moment.
Yeah, Iran's response, they say, is firm and proportionate. Let's just hear from the Israeli Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, on this.
I commend the International Atomic Energy Agency Board of Governors for its decision yesterday, a decision which clearly states that Iran is continuing to play games and is continuing to conceal and hide. On the one hand, we see in this decision the lies and the hypocrisy of Iran on the nuclear issue and in general. On the other hand, we see here a firm stance by the countries of the world regarding the distinction between good and evil, as they clearly state that Iran is concealing things. We will not let up on this issue.
You recently traveled to Israel. Do you believe that that trip to Israel aggravated Iran and may have played into, or did play into, the calculation for today's steps by Tehran?
I don't get into that kind of analysis. You know, if I was to talk to people on the basis of third parties' possible reactions to what I would be doing, I would not be able to perform my functions as Director General of an international organization. I think, of course, views, opinions are absolutely legitimate. The important thing is what I do as Director General vis-a-vis countries, including Iran, and what Iran does with regards to its own responsibilities and its own legal obligations. That is what matters. If we start having serious, grave political decisions on the basis of visits or opinions or views or quotes, then we are in deep trouble. So again, what we need to do is to work, and Iran knows what they need to do.
3 to 4 weeks, you say, is the window.
Yeah.
If that passes, that will deal a fatal blow to the deal.
Yes.
Are you suggesting that we have about a month before this crisis escalates into new uncharted territory? And if so, what are your fears about that territory?
Let me say, my estimation is not a political one. It's a technical one. My estimation is based on the relative time we can afford to not have access to this type of information. In other words, the amount of time we can have with the centrifuges spinning, with the heavy water production continuing, with the construction and assembly of centrifuges ongoing, without us having a view on that. Because
And your view would
if
be
that
what?
happens
Your
within
view would
this
be
time
what if they were
period,
allowed to do
we
that
could
without
more or less
verification?
Let me explain. We could more or less reconstruct. We could more or less reconstruct what may have happened, but these projections are something that you do for a relatively short period of time. You cannot go for months and months without any access, without any information, and then say, well, you know, there is this amount probably. So this is why we're saying 3-4 weeks is something we could handle. So it's not a political, I leave this to the politicians. This is a technical assessment by the IAEA, yes.
But that's extremely important. You are saying that you need oversight, or you need to be able to verify what's going on. If you don't, within 3 to 4 weeks, you are clearly concerned about what Iran will be achieving with its nuclear program, correct?
I will be concerned about not being able to confirm what they have or what they do not have. This is the point.
Are you speaking to your Iranian counterparts right now, and are you planning on visiting Tehran?
I hope we can do that. I certainly hope we can do that. We are saying things with the gravity they deserve. At the same time, we are saying there is time, there is a margin that we should put to the best possible use starting now.
So it's good to have you on. Please stay in touch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to talk.
Rafael Grossi for you. Well, just ahead, Russia's war on Ukraine is sparking a new warning of more hunger across the world. I'll bring you team coverage on that up next.
Inside Africa, in association with Zenith Bank.
See the situation of the country and people complaining about unemployment, I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
Bright Jaja is on a mission to change that by first working to change the public's perception of trade work in Nigeria.
We just create a system that supports training to identify experts, match them with people who want to train, and then they run an apprenticeship program for about 3 months to a year. Some of the trade that we focused on are carpentry, tiling, graphic design, web design, makeup, basically everything technical and vocational.
Bright says I Create Africa has had a big impact and has even bigger goals.
It's changing things. When it comes to the people that we've trained directly and connected to jobs directly, they're over 20,000. Our goal is to hit 5 million in the next 5 years.
On Culinary Journeys, meet Japan's Natsuko Shoji, a chef earning rave reviews. Inspired by art, she is a rising star in French cuisine and in an industry where men dominate. See how she overcame life's challenges despite the odds and is now paving the way for a new generation. Culinary Journeys, Sunday on CNN, in association with Ajinomoto.
We're here at the home of one of the FSB team. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
What do you want the world to know?
People are so exhausted. Just gonna help her carry this bag.
Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy.
I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you.
Now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their stories.
You could call it the Hunger Games, the real ones unfolding across the world as we speak. The UN says the food crisis sparked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine means 47 million people could face what it calls acute food insecurity this year. That is serious hunger. At the same time, a separatist leader says the first railway shipments of Ukrainian grain have left an occupied region in the south. Russian media quoted him as saying they are going through Crimea in the direction of the Middle East. Russia says it has no grain deals with the Middle East, or Turkey for that matter, but it's working on it. Moscow also denying accusations it's been stealing massive amounts of Ukrainian grain. And Kyiv has other big worries, including the fighting in eastern Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky says the fate of the entire Donbass region is being decided in Severodonetsk. This comes as local officials say Russia now controls most of that key eastern city. Well, CNN's Claire Sebastian has been looking at this food crisis from here in London. You've been on this beat now for, what, more than 3 months that this war has been ongoing. Let's talk about this grain. There seemed to be quite some confusion as to what is going on here. As we understand it, grain is being taken out of Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Who's taking it? Where's it going? And who's paying for it?
Yeah, it's murky. I mean, this is the fog of war in a lot of ways. What we have today is that Ukraine is saying that Russia is taking it, at least a portion of it. The Agrarian Council says that 600,000 tons has been stolen. That's over the past few months. Roughly the same number came from the Deputy Agrarian Minister who just spoke to Julia Chatterley. And have a listen to him because he talks about evidence for what exactly is happening to it.
Unfortunately, we have the situation where about 500,000 tons of grain has been stolen by Russians on the partly occupied territories of Ukraine. We do know this because we have received the information from the people on the elevators that Russians came, just took this grain, came with military power. And also we have the video and photo effects of cars and rail cars bringing this grain towards the direction of Russia or occupied Crimea.
He then says that from occupied Crimea, they have evidence, satellite images that show it being taken to other countries. And CNN has uncovered similar evidence of that. Accounts from farmers, Ukrainian officials, shipping sources have shown that it is in certain quantities being taken out of Ukraine. And the extraordinary thing today, Becky, is that we then have these comments, one from the head of the Russian military administration in occupied Zaporizhia, who said that the first rail shipments of grain left the occupied town of Melitopol going to Crimea. He hopes they would find their way to Turkey and the Middle East. And as you said, the Kremlin spokesman said that there aren't deals yet with Turkey and the Middle East, but they are working on it. So it is murky, but extraordinary that Russia could be talking about that openly.
Yeah, and just to be quite clear, before I get to Kyiv and to Salma Abdelaziz, our correspondent on the ground there, we know Ukraine produces much of the world's grain, and we know that there is a serious concern now about a global food crisis. When we talk about 500,000 tons of grain is what's being suggested by the Ukrainians being stolen, allegedly, by the Russians, how significant is that?
So it's not huge in terms of the annual harvest of Ukraine. I think was about 80 million tons in 2021. The amount, actually, this is more significant in terms of world hunger, is the amount trapped in storage in Ukraine, which is estimated to be about 20 million tons. So the amount being stolen isn't a huge amount so far, but we're hearing from Russian officials in the occupied area saying that they hope that more could be done. So it looks like it could become part of a pattern, and it doesn't build trust for these negotiations. No. That is the problem here.
No, absolutely. And we know those grain silos are full. I mean, the grain exists despite the fact that the farmers are struggling at present, and there's obviously the issue of whether this summer harvest will actually come good. But the grain does exist. It's in those silos, ready to be shipped. It's just a question of who's getting hold of it and where it's going at this point. Thank you. Let's get you to the ground and to Salma Abdelaziz, as promised. We've been talking about the Ukrainian grain story. You've got more on what's going on the ground, as I understand it. What's the story there?
Absolutely. Let's start with Severodonetsk. Of course, that is the flashpoint city right now. President Zelensky says the fate of the Donbass region, that is the crucial region that Russia is trying to take control of, the fate of it lies in that battle. And that battle is quite simply not going the way of Ukrainian forces. Last night, they say there were fierce artillery rounds, shelling, hitting of Ukrainian positions. They've been forced to retreat to fortified locations, essentially a strategic retreat, according to Ukrainian Ukrainian forces, they say they are catastrophically short of artillery rounds. They are outmanned. They are outgunned. A superior Russian artillery force has been pounding them, grinding these Ukrainian forces for weeks now. It is hard to imagine, Becky, how they can continue to hold Severodonetsk for much longer. The best, really, that it looks like Ukrainian forces can hope for is to drag this out, is to drag out Russian resources. And why does this matter? Let's pull up that map. Why does Severodonetsk matter? It is the last, essentially, the last stronghold in the Luhansk Republic. So in that region, if Severodonetsk falls, you are just that one step closer to the larger goal President Putin has of controlling the Donbass region. And let's keep that map up, because regardless of whether or not Severodonetsk is taken, Russia is creating facts on the ground, realities on the ground, and that is a land bridge. And this was part of the goal in the invasion of Ukraine, a land bridge that connects Russia all the way down to Crimea, through the Donbass, through those occupied regions of Kherson and Mariupol, down to the warm water ports on the Black Sea. Those would be the only warm water ports that would function year-round for Russia. And that's already happening, Becky, regardless of whether the international community recognizes it, because Russia is rebuilding the infrastructure. Already hundreds of miles of railways rebuilt. They say there's a steady rail traffic now between Russia down to the region of Crimea. They're reopening the ports in Mariupol and Berdyansk. An important canal that was in Kherson, which is now, again, Russian occupied during this conflict, that provides fresh water to Crimea. So what Russia is doing is, again, creating facts on the ground, building the infrastructure, owning and occupying and running these territories, whether or not the international community recognizes it. So when and if Russia comes to the negotiating table, those are the realities on the ground. Of course, Ukraine, for its part, trying to claw back every bit of territory it can, but it's really holding off here a much bigger, much more powerful military. Becky.
And when you speak to people on the ground, you're in Kyiv, for example, when you speak to people on the ground, that's some distance away, of course, from the real front lines, as it were, at this point. Although when we spoke to you this time yesterday, there were sirens going off behind you, so we can't forget that there is aggressive behaviour still by the Russians in other parts of Ukraine. What are people telling you about how they believe this might end?
Becky, this is a moment of extraordinary national unity. President Zelensky, in particular, who has addressed his countrymen nearly every single day. He's spoken on every single detail in this conflict. He's been an absolutely unifying force. And for Ukrainians, they are not willing to give up an inch. To them, absolutely any concessions to Russia is quite simply appeasement to President Putin, to someone that they see, again, President Putin, as an appetite that will not end, that will not cease. It would be appeasement to give those territories away. So we're looking at the realities on the ground here, but at the same time, you have a Ukraine that is absolutely steadfast, that they are not going to give up their territories to any Russian forces, regardless of where the tanks are placed.
Salma Abdelaziz is on the ground in Ukraine. Claire with me here in the studio. To both of you, thank you. Well, this just into CNN. 2 British citizens and a Moroccan man have been sentenced to death by a pro-Russian court in what's known as the Donetsk People's Republic in eastern Ukraine. Russian media reporting that the 3 men are accused of being mercenaries for Ukraine. The men were captured by Russian forces in mid-April in Mariupol. Well, we know, and we've been discussing, the impact of this war is not just on the Ukrainian people, but it is global at this point through the price of fuel and food. And for the first time in more than a decade, the European Central Bank plans to raise interest rates. The bank just announced it would leave the current rate for banks to deposit money with the central bank overnight at -0.5%. That negative number is basically a penalty for not lending the money. The ECB says, though, it will likely raise rates 0.25 percentage point next month. And the goal there is to rein in this inflation that's been creeping up since last year, to be quite frank, but worse, of course, worsened by this war in Ukraine. It's now at a record 8.1% and growing. One place that has been particularly hard hit by inflation is Italy. Barbie Nadeau joining us now from Rome with that part of the story. And the ECB decision, of course, will affect people in Italy. This decision coming for the Eurozone as opposed to the US and the UK, of course. What do you expect people will make of that in Italy?
Well, you know, it's always different. What's good for the institutions isn't always good for the people. And we've been trying to understand how people are affected by this inflation. We've been talking to people who are producing the food, trying not to pass on the extra cost to the consumers. Let's hear what we found.
Signora, buonasera. Spaghetti al pomodoro.
Grazie.
Prego.
This is the quintessential Italian meal, spaghetti with tomato. But the price of this Italian staple has increased tremendously over the last year.
To understand why the cost to produce pasta from durum wheat and tomato sauce from fresh tomatoes has gone up, we went directly to the source. Here at the Maestri Pastai pasta factory in southern Italy, owner Valentina Castiello tells us the price of some of the raw materials to make her pasta have jumped by 100%. She tells us her company is trying to find ways to absorb the excess, but some of it will go to the consumer.
We have increased the price of our final product by 30%. The cost is high, but the consumer continues to buy the affordable products that everyone can use at home.
The average Italian eats around 50 pounds of pasta every year. Castiello says to confront the rising cost of living, distributors are actually buying more inventory from her factory. Because even if the price of pasta goes up, it is still by far the most affordable way for many Italians to put food on the table. The rising costs range from packaging to electricity to fuel to transport these goods. But it isn't just pasta makers struggling to produce economical food. At this tomato farm near Rome that Dalila Marasca owns with her father and brother, things aren't much easier. She tells us that fertilizer costs alone have risen 150% over last year. They had to make a drastic decision to reduce the number of tomatoes they planted by 40% because they have no idea what the market will be like when these new tomato plants are ready to harvest. Marasca says the tomato is the base of the Italian diet, during the summer as fresh produce and during the other seasons as canned products. The factors driving the prices of these fundamental Italian ingredients are complicated. First came the pandemic, then Russia's war in Ukraine, and now the uncertainty of what's next.
And you know, Becky, when you look at that, you know, all the components that go into such a simple meal, we're not talking about luxury items, we're not talking about meat and fish or caviar, you know, we're talking about basic pasta and tomato. And if that's being affected already by the war and the other factors, it's hard to imagine what's coming around the corner. Becky?
Fascinating. Thank you, Barbie. Next hour, we're going to take a look at the factors pushing the global economy to the brink. I'll speak with Maurice Obstfeld, economic professor and former chief economist at the International Monetary Fund. A story that affects us all. Well, after nearly a year of secret work and thousands of interviews behind closed doors, the panel investigating the January the 6th attack on the US Capitol finally goes public today. The first of at least 6 hearings is headed to primetime TV in just a matter of hours. We will preview what American viewers and indeed the rest of the world can expect.
When you invest in people, you give them the opportunity to be more. With up to 20 million young people joining the African workforce each year, empowering the next generation has never been more important. Access Bank's Project LEAD has equipped over 90,000 students with leadership training. And our Pitchathon scheme invests in female entrepreneurs, helping them realize their vision. Access. More than banking.
Mainland China tolerates no signs of dissent whatsoever.
Are you anticipating dozens of people being prosecuted? Hundreds? Thousands?
Stories of mass internment camps have been trickling out.
Do you think you'll see your husband again?
This period of mourning is taking place in a real climate of fear. The humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in front of our eyes here.
This is one of the cells? Come on in here.
We're flying over ISIS front lines. This is the only protection we have. The nerves are still very much on edge. Firefighters have been battling this blaze for weeks. What do you say to people who question climate change?
We need to do something now.
Ivan Watson, CNN.
I'm Delia Gallagher in Rome, and this is CNN.
Welcome back. I'm Becky Anderson in London. You're watching Connect the World. This show is out of London this week, where the time is 3:30. More than 500 days after the storming of the US Capitol building, it's a critical and historic moment for American democracy. The US public and the world can tune in to watch as the special US House committee investigating the January 6th attack will begin to lay out its case on primetime television. The panel says it will use this first of at least 6 hearings to make the case that former President Donald Trump was at the center of a coordinated, multi-step effort to overturn Joe Biden's 2020 election win. It'll also try to connect the dots between Mr. Trump's election lies and the violence that unfolded that day. The committee plans to show clips of private interviews with Trump aides, campaign officials, and members of his inner circle. There will also be, we are told, never-before-seen footage of the attack to remind people of what is at stake. And we expect to hear live witness testimony from 2 people who had an up-close view of the rioters. CNN's Pamela Brown has more.
After a nearly year-long investigation, the January 6th committee is preparing to share their findings with the American people. And they are zeroing in on one man, former President Trump.
I think that Donald Trump and the White House were at the center of these events. That's the only way, really, of making sense of them all.
From the beginning, the investigation has focused on the unprecedented efforts by Trump and his allies to try to stop the transfer of power to President Joe Biden. While Trump was impeached by the House just days after the riot for inciting the pro-Trump insurrectionists, the committee says it's uncovered more since then.
The Select Committee has found evidence about a lot more than incitement here.
The committee has interviewed more than 1,000 witnesses behind closed doors, including Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Rudy Giuliani, former Attorney General Bill Barr, and obtained more than 135,000 documents.
We must also know what happened every minute of that day in the White House. Every phone call, every conversation, every meeting leading up to, during, and after the attack.
The committee is clearly signaling to the Justice Department, which holds the power to charge Trump with a crime related to January 6th.
Do you believe it was a conspiracy?
I do. It is extremely broad. It's extremely well organized. It's really chilling.
Just this week, a federal judge again flagged possible evidence of a crime. That same judge issued a landmark ruling earlier this year, finding it was more likely than not that Trump and a conservative lawyer committed a crime and strategizing to overturn the election. Trump has not been charged with a crime and has denied any wrongdoing. he continues to downplay his involvement in the deadly insurrection while bashing the committee's work as another, quote, witch hunt.
January 6th, what a lot of crap. It's another con job, just like Russia.
But for 187 minutes, committee members say Trump was derelict in his duty, watching TV and seemingly pleased supporters were fighting for him, even as Republicans pleaded for Trump to intervene in text messages to his White House chief of staff.
It is a roadmap, and I would have to say at this point, I think Mark Meadows is the MVP for the committee.
Denver Riggleman advised the committee, helping to decode Meadows' texts among the more than 2,300 messages obtained by CNN. Donald Trump Jr. texting, "He's got to condemn this shit ASAP." Meadows responding, "I am pushing it hard. I agree." But it took Trump over 3 hours to release this recorded video.
So go home. We love you. You're very special.
When you look at the totality of the evidence, it's pretty apparent that at some points President Trump knew what was going on.
Well, the hearings are not only expected to explore efforts to overturn the election results, but also the role of far-right extremist groups. 1 month after the election, Trump tweeted about the protest in D.C. on January 6th. The following day, the Proud Boys began to plan for the rally, knowing they might have to break the law to stop the certification of votes. That's according to a plea agreement from one member of the Proud Boys who is now cooperating with the federal investigation. The DOJ escalating that criminal case this week, charging several leaders with seditious conspiracy. Pamela Brown, CNN, Washington.
A little more on this. Daniela Diaz has the latest from the Capitol. Aides say the panel will reveal new evidence that will help, quote, connect the dots between President Trump's election lies and his attempt to overturn the election. What sort of evidence might we see in these hearings starting tonight?
Becky, remember, this is going to be the first time we're actually seeing the committee in public, and they will present this evidence that of these interviews they've been doing for the last couple of months. They've been working diligently behind closed doors, interviewing many witnesses related to former President Donald Trump. And this is going to play out in a very interesting way. First, we're going to hear from Chairman Benny Thompson of the committee. He plans to give an opening statement. Then we'll also hear from Republican and ranking member Liz Cheney. She plans to give an opening statement, and the two of them will be the ones leading this hearing and doing most of the questioning in this hearing with the witnesses. Another thing is we're expecting this to play out in 3 different ways, 3 different distinct things that we will see later tonight. First off, we expect to see never before seen footage of the violence of that day. Of course, there were a lot of people recording what happened that day, and we expect to see some new footage from that, new evidence. We also expect to see some footage from the behind closed doors interviews and depositions that the committee has been working on for the past couple of months very privately. And we also expect testimony from 2 individuals, one of them being Caroline Edwards. She is actually a U.S. Capitol Police officer who was injured that day, the first to be injured, and suffered a traumatic brain injury. And another being the documentary filmmaker Nick Quested. He is expected to display an array of what he saw firsthand that day when he was embedded with the rioters. So it's really going to be an important day for this question of what happened on January 6th. Was it a really terrible day for democracy? And the point being that this committee really wants to educate Americans of that day and how terrible it was, and see if maybe, just maybe, they're able to really imprint that day in Americans' minds. Remember, this is a prime time here in the United States, prime time hearing that will take place and will be aired on and live streamed in this country.
Described by one as a TV spectacular that will blow the roof off. Well, be sure, thank you, Daniela, to tune in for live coverage of the January the 6th committee hearings starting 7 p.m. on Thursday in Washington. That is 3 in the morning on Friday in Abu Dhabi, midnight here in London, right here on CNN. Well, US President Joe Biden is tackling a host of issues with his regional counterparts at the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles, amongst them the influx of migrants at the US's borders. As we speak, a caravan of 5,000 people making their way through north through Mexico. Save the Children asking for special protection and medical attention for about 1,000 children who are amongst those in the caravan. Now, to tackle this humanitarian and political issue, President Biden will need the cooperation of several countries, including Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador and Guatemala. However, the leaders of those nations are either not invited or are boycotting the summit over the exclusion of Cuba, Nicaragua and Venezuela because of their human rights records and autocratic governments. We're going to take a very short break. Back after this, please.
Inside Africa Fact File, in association with Zenith Bank.
Friday. New details on what happened inside the White House during the Capitol attack. The January 6 hearings. Live coverage starts Friday on CNN.
Flytrex works with drones, which are basically robots. You don't have to pay salaries to robots. And that way we can take the cost, make it an order of magnitude more affordable than using humans for deliveries, especially in the suburbs where the population density is too low to optimize for multiple deliveries in the same run. We can basically offer a free delivery to our customers and charge a very small amount from the different restaurant chains and retailers. So it's basically a win-win situation for everybody, getting you your meal hotter, faster, and in a more affordable way. And we're already servicing almost 10,000 families in North Carolina, making deliveries 7 days a week, every day, to people's backyards during lunch, dinner. We send Tylenol in the afternoons, diapers in the evening, just servicing whatever people need in their homes.
I'm David McKenzie in Cape Town, and this is CNN.
Well, this just into CNN. CNN has learned that the PGA Tour has suspended 17 golfers who are currently playing in the Live Golf Series just outside of London or plan to in the future. Some of them big names, including Dustin Johnson and Phil Mickelson. The PGA saying their players made their choice to take part in the Saudi-backed league for, quote, financial reasons. Well, Amanda Davis is here for more on this. I know you're going to do it in World Sport. This just coming into us. Just how significant is this?
This is big. I mean, the PGA Tour had threatened retaliation, and that is exactly what they've issued within minutes of these players taking to the course. That was what they were waiting for. Alex Thomas is going to be live from the Centurion Club for us in just a couple of minutes in World Sport.
The first of a series of events in this Live tournament. Thank you for that. Stay with us for World Sport. That story after this.
One of the uses of artificial intelligence in radiology right now is finding breast cancer. Because if you find breast cancer early, you can do a very good job of curing somebody with relatively minimal treatment. Fujifilm's medical AI can help by highlighting which of those 1,000 images has an important finding on it. We can take care of patients on a more timely basis and ultimately make a huge difference for those patients.
June 20th, a CNN concert event. Let's celebrate, educate, and lift every voice. Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom. Live from the Hollywood Bowl, only on CNN.
I want to go now to an incredible story of survival. Could all this spending lead to a bigger economic crisis? Or would you do it all again in terms of being a nurse?
I want to help people more than I ever have.
Aaron Burnett out front on CNN.
Hi, thanks for joining us. Welcome along to World Sport live from London with me, Amanda Davis. Some breaking news to start the show. The start of play was never going to end the controversy. The PGA Tour had threatened action, and now that the players have taken to the course of the Saudi-backed breakaway Live Golf Invitational Series, the PGA Tour have announced their retaliation, banning all of the stars who have signed up. In a statement issued by PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan within the last hour, the US-based golf body have said that they're implementing the sanction on, quotes, those players who have decided to turn their backs on the PGA Tour by willfully violating a regulation. So let's cross live to the Centurion Club and join my World Sport colleague, Alex Thomas. Alex, things are getting spicy, aren't they? How would you describe that PGA Tour response?
Absolutely brutal. That was the nuclear option, and they have taken it. There's no doubt that there was a simmering fury about the 2-page, 9-paragraph memo that PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan had clearly got ready in advance, couldn't issue it until the players had done something wrong. So when they teed off in a shotgun start, so all of them together at 2:15 p.m. local time here at the Centurion Club just outside London, within minutes that memo was dropped to chosen media and then soon made publicly available under an embargo. We'll get to that in a moment, but the Live Golf response was almost just as swift, saying today's announcement by the PGA Tour is vindictive and it deepens the divide between the Tour and its members. It's troubling that the Tour, an organisation dedicated to creating opportunities for golfers to play the game, is the entity blocking golfers from playing. This certainly is not the last word on this topic. The era of free agency is beginning, as we are proud to have a full field of players joining us in London and beyond. Let me highlight the crucial paragraph from Jay Monahan, the PGA Tour Commissioner's memo. There's a kind of mafia-like response, a "you are dead to me" vibe going on. It was addressed to the PGA Tour members as if to say, I don't ever want to hear from you guys that have quit the Tour. The crucial paragraph is this. This week, the RBC Canadian Open is a shining example of what you have created with the PGA Tour. A star-studded field, a committed sponsor, sold-out hospitality offerings, record crowds, and a global broadcast distribution. These elements are part of the Tour's DNA, built by the likes of Jack and Arnie, furthered by Tiger and countless others whose legacies are inextricably linked with each other and with the PGA Tour. This collective legacy can't be bought or sold. A huge explicit dig about the money here on the Live Golf Series, backed by the billions of dollars of Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. Money, money, money was another phrase elsewhere in the memo. Professional men's golf, Amanda, is in all-out civil war.
Yeah, really fascinating, isn't it? That the use of just the players identified by the single word, like Tiger. Really, really fascinating stuff. Of course, the players that this affects, though, are still out on the course, aren't they? What do you think the reaction from them will be? Has anything been trickling through as yet?
I think we can now say that when Phil Mickelson refused to discuss what the PGA Tour sanctions would be in his press conference on Tuesday, I think it's because he knew what was coming. Let's hear what he did actually say.
I've gained a lot. I've received a lot from the PGA Tour. I'm very grateful for that. I'm grateful for everything the PGA Tour and the game of golf has provided for me and my family. I've also worked really hard to contribute and try to build and add value to the tour during my time there. And I worked really hard to earn a lifetime exemption. And I don't want to give that up. I don't believe I should have to.
Live Golf initially tried to work with the PGA Tour and Europe's DP World Tour. They didn't want to have anything to do with it, but they also said they would back any players who joined them and then had to face legal action. Mickelson's the prime candidate, but so too, Amanda, are the players who quit the PGA Tour, because the PGA Tour punishment, which said you can't play in any of their competitions, also mentioned the players that are quit. So they can't take sponsor invites. They think they're free agents. It's heading for the courts.
And we're still, of course, waiting for any response from the DP World Tour, formerly the European Tour. This is very much just beginning, isn't it, Alex? For now, thanks very much indeed. Well, after Game 3 of the NBA Finals, the Golden State Warriors find themselves down. But are they and Steph Curry out? Find out after the break.
They're small, they're unathletic.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
At CNN, we see the devastation caused by natural disasters, famine, and war. We also see how the generosity of others can change lives. You and CNN's Impact Your World can help. Reputable charities that are checked out by CNN. See the difference it makes when you give time, share stories, or donate. By just clicking the button, be a part of the solution. Impact Your World.
Welcome back. The players were putting their bodies on the line quite literally in Game 3 of the NBA Finals, and what proved a disappointing night in Boston for the Golden State Warriors. Not only were they beaten, but Steph Curry was left limping, and he is in a race against time to get back to fitness with Game 4 in less than 48 hours. The Boston crowd made sure to make their presence felt for the Celtics' first home game of their final series with the Warriors, and it really made an impact. The Celtics running up an 18-point lead at one point, fueled by a franchise record-tying finals first quarter by Jaylen Brown, scoring 17 of his 27. The Celtics showing their fighting spirit. They have not lost in back-to-back games for this entire postseason. Boston's trio of Brown, Jason Tatum and Marcus Smart combining for 77 points in a 116-100 win.
Just being focused and locked in and everybody competing and being on the same page. We're going to need that, obviously, to get the job done.
Where we hang our hat on is effort on the defensive end and being a physical team. So it definitely woke us up a little bit. And we just want to come out and, if we were going to come out here and play, the last thing when we left that court, we didn't want to say, well, we weren't physical enough. And it worked out for us.
Well, despite Steph Curry dropping a game-high 31 points, the defeat means the Warriors have lost 4 of the last 5 road playoff games. That was the scary moment for the two-time league MVP late in the fourth quarter. He scrambled for a loose ball. His foot trampled on by Celtics' Al Horford, all 240 pounds of him. He was at the bottom of the pile, pinned down in pain. But Curry says he should be okay for Game 4.
I'll be all right. Excuse me. It was, I got caught underneath Al. Obviously, be some pain, but I'll be all right. Figure out how it feels tomorrow and get ready for Friday.
I saw him getting dove on, and that was about that. So I picked up my foul, pushing him off of him because he's screaming at the bottom of the pile. So, yeah, it is what it is. I'll take the foul. I'm going to get him off his legs, though. So it's all good.
You can see what Draymond Green's son thought of things. Now, the head of police in Paris has apologised to fans who attended last month's Champions League final, saying there was, quote, obviously a failure in the procedures. Both Liverpool and Real Madrid demanded an inquiry after supporters were targeted with tear gas by French police ahead of kickoff as chaos reigned outside the Stade de France, with thousands of ticket holders struggling to gain access to the stadium in time for kickoff. And speaking to the French Senate, Paris Police Chief Didier Lallement has said he takes full responsibility for police management, adding, "People were pushed or assaulted when we owed them safety." He said the image of the country has been shaken. Now, just 4 days after seeing their World Cup dreams ended by Wales, Ukraine's players regrouped to produce a victory over the Republic of Ireland in UEFA's Nations League. Like in Scotland and Wales in recent weeks, Ukraine were given a brilliant reception at Lansdowne Road, with fans showing solidarity for the players taking part despite war still raging at home. They were by far the